clock on the wall tells us it's time for another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, where we explore how educators, just like you, are using innovative instructional strategies, including how to leverage AI to improve teaching and learning.
Each week, we share real classroom stories, tools, and tips to help you save time, personalize instruction, and lead with confidence.
I'm Jeanine Nostrum, an elementary school principal.
And I'm Robyn D'Angelo, an elementary school teacher. Let's get started with today's Friday debrief.
Oh my goodness, okay. Robyn, I'm excited. We have a full house today.
We certainly do. I'm excited to welcome all of our teachers and colleagues here with us today.
Yeah, should we go around the room like roll call and let everyone introduce themselves? Robyn, I'll let you take the lead on that.
Okay, absolutely. Today, joining us on our Roundtable Friday debrief, we have first grade teacher, Miss Ashley Novellino, second grade teacher, Diane Lipfany, third grade teacher, Miss Anna Maria Matrano, other extraordinary third grade teachers, Miss Alex Telfer, and Miss Sarah Gaines.
Yeah, we're really happy to have all of you with us. And Robyn, what I love about this is it started in your classroom, right, with third grade. So, you know, I expect to see third grade teachers showing interest. That makes sense to me. But we also now have second grade teachers and first grade teachers. And as we've mentioned before, we even have high school teachers in the district who are collaborating with us. So it's really exciting. We have been really talking about ways that we can bring together some big ideas about teachers using AI in the classroom and using it ethically, using it to help refine their instruction, lighten the load for them in terms of assessment and planning. And we've had such really great results that we wanted to invite some classroom teachers in so they could share with us how they have been doing with their work. We're going through this acronym of GROW, right? Gather, refine, organize, and watch. And so we have had, you know, just such tremendous interest. We thought we would invite some colleagues in to share and unpack what they've been doing in their classrooms. So other teachers who might be interested could perhaps get some ideas from them and replicate the work in their classrooms.
Absolutely. And, you know, as we started going through this acronym of GROW in our PLC, it's just amazing to me as a teacher here at our school that we collaborate so much every single day. And I have the teachers on here are phenomenal teachers. And we talk every day about how we take those PLC ideas and put it into action in our classroom. And I'm just in awe of all of them because they're coming to the table today with amazing ideas, amazing things that they're doing in their classroom. And I'm just so proud of our collaboration coming from that GROW acronym in our PLC that we have been seeing. But now, how does that really transfer into the classroom, putting it in action into the classroom with the students?
Yeah, so maybe we could start with, why don't we start with first grade? Because, you know, that we've talked so much about third grade, but let's start with first grade. Can you tell us a little bit, Ashley, about how you've been using AI in your classroom? In what way has it been helping you? How has it helped you with analyzing student work? Or just talk into that a little bit, because you definitely jumped right in gathering information and using AI as a thought partner.
So I was talking with Robyn after school one day, and I wanted to figure out how I can use AI more in the classroom. So what I did is I took all of my students' writing, and I had ChatGPT kind of go through that and pick a class trend rather than individual trends. And what I noticed was that my students weren't understanding necessarily what a complete thought was. So we started with that, and I got the idea of going with finished or not finished. So from there, I had ChatGPT kind of go with me, and we created some do-nows that we started with every morning. And once I noticed that they mastered, okay, they know the who and the what that should be in a sentence, we moved on to a little bit more of a complex area. So now we started doing a tell me more. So using 4 W's of who, what, when, and where. And it's been part of their do-nows every morning. And I could just see the growth from starting this last week to this week. Like, it's just amazing how they're picking up on it now. Like even when I'm reading and we were doing writing today and we're reading the sentences and they looked at it and they're like, oh, I forgot a who in my sentence. And I'm like, okay, let's go back and make sure we do that. So it's been really impactful coming from that. It's a lot less work than I thought it was going to have to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more overwhelming, but it really wasn't. It's as quick and easy as Robyn had said. I just scan it really quickly and I get to make that final decision on what I'm teaching. It gives me the ideas, but I like the idea that I'm like, okay, I want to teach more about complete sentences. Let's keep focusing on this until I notice that they've mastered that, and then we'll move on into a new skill.
I love two things that Ashley said. If I could just hone in on them for a minute. Number one, she asks for ideas, but she has the final say in actually what she's doing in the classroom, because we know we ask AI for ideas and it's great with giving us ideas and organizing information, but she's the final say. And I have to say that I love how Ashley comes literally into my classroom and she's like, oh, look at this. This is the best thing. Look at my kids. They made advancements and improvements. And I love that energy that she brings every day, that excitement to watch her kids grow through this whole grow process. That's really what it's about. So every day I wait for Ashley's excitement to come rolling into my class and, to tell me how her students have advanced and what she's trying next.
So Ashley, I just have a question for you. I know you're comfortable with technology in general. That's something that comes easily to you. You like technology. You're comfortable using it in the classroom. But what was your opinion about AI initially? Like in terms of your own, I guess, perspective on it, the lens that you approached it with. Were you optimistic? Were you skeptical? Were you excited? How did you approach it? What was your attitude towards it?
I was a little skeptical at first. I was like, how is this actually going to help me? Like, I'm like, does it make me a bad teacher if I'm using AI? But it actually just helps me even more. Like now I have more time to go through and like really pinpoint different groups and really hone in. Whereas I might not have noticed these smaller groups, and now it's a lot easier. So now I'm excited to use it. Like Robyn said, I go into her room all the time. I'm like, this is what we're doing today. And now I made a good anchor chart. I get really excited about all my anchor charts now that ChatGPT is helping me create. So I was skeptical, but now I'm like excited to use it, and it's really helpful.
Great. So glad to hear that. So let's travel on to second grade. So Diane, you actually were one of the people who jumped in pretty early when we were, kicking around how do we use AI to help us assess student work and look for trends and things like that. And I remember we were sitting in a second grade level meeting and I had run the second grade scores. And I think at that moment, it seemed to me that you were like, oh, okay, this can really help us identify trends and look for patterns and things like that. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your journey with AI in your classroom, how you're using it, and maybe how it's evolved for you over time as a second grade teacher?
Initially, I really wasn't sure how I was going to use it in my classroom. And then I started dabbling with like making differentiated materials, different topics on different levels. So each kid could access information on a particular level. So I started really with reading. And I started more making supplementary materials for science, for reading, etc. And then Robyn started talking about running data. And I started really just working whole class, running everything through whole class, looking at some of the whole class trends and kind of seeing what the strengths and weaknesses of that crew was. And then this year I started working a little bit more with individual, snapshots of individual kids, particularly ones that I was concerned about or ones I worked with like after school that I wanted to kind of particularly hone in on something. And I also worked a little bit more on whole class, on a small group instruction and what their strengths and weaknesses were. And what's great about ChatGPT is it makes your groups for you based on the data you give them. And so while you could certainly do it yourself, it does confirm kind of where, you feel like your kids are. It also gives you suggestions of like what lessons to do with each one, how to modify depending on the level. So that's been really helpful. This recent go, I had the kids write just like a litmus test at the end of a unit, write me a paragraph. And what I noticed as the class trend, regardless of whether it was a good writer or not, was the lack of transition words. And that got me thinking again, okay, now what? Because I've taught transition words in informational and I've taught them in narrative, and they're not sticking. And so then that made me kind of go back and riff for Chat GPT. How can I teach transition words, with some more memorable events and specificity? And then what I did is I came up with kind of a bookmark about the different kinds of narrative words showing time. When I used to teach narrative transition words, I talk about them showing time moving on, and I listed a bunch of time moving on, but I didn't really talk about the span of time. And then with ChatGPT, it talks about like kind of differentiating like a little time passing, big amount of time passing, things happening at the same time. The story keeps moving on. And so it differentiated the time words for me a little bit more. And I was able to teach them. I did movements to the different words, like for small spans of time, we took a small step. For a big one, we took big steps. For things happening at the same time, we pointed in different directions. For moving on, we did this. So I had kind of hand gestures that went with it. Plus we created a bookmark that kind of helped them kind of understand. I don't know if you're going to really see it, but it has the different time. And each child got one of those. And then what they did is, because our new unit is writing, putting a familiar character in a new adventure, is they wrote a piece on chart paper in pairs. And when they were writing, they had their bookmarks, but I also had somebody that was in charge of being like the transition word writer. And so they did those in marker. So they stood out, and they had their bookmarks, and they talked about like the time passing in their stories. And I feel like it finally stuck. I'm feeling like I'm getting good results. They were excited about it. Matter of fact, today, as second grade teachers, we flipped classrooms to see each other's because we did all the same. We all wrote on chart paper, and the kids highlighted their transition words. And, when we were looking as teachers in each other's rooms, we thought it was pretty cool to see how kids did it differently in different classrooms. So we were thinking, why don't we have the kids come in and read each other's? It would be interesting for them. And so that's what we did today. So my class went to Mrs. Marcuse and Miss Lacharska's and vice versa. They got to read each other's pieces. And the ELL teacher was there, and she's like, this will be so memorable for them now, because they really enjoyed writing in partners on chart paper and reading each other's and writing those those transition words, as we call them, beep beeps in second, with the markers. And so we really feel like it has stuck this time for narrative transitions. One thing I'm finding now for my new move is really to think about character traits, because we're revisiting them from the beginning of the year, and that was not easy for them because of vocabulary issues. So that's my new mission, is to riff with chat to get some ideas.
I have to say, Diane is determined. I thank you so much for your determination, Diane, because every day when we chat, Diane's back at the grind. She nope, we didn't do it. We didn't get it this time. I'm going to run it again and do it next time. So Diane truly determined to make her kids successful, through her lens and AI lens. And thank you so much. I'm in awe of your determination every day that I talk to you, Diane, about continuing this mission with us. And I know I could always bounce ideas off of you as well. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing as well with this.
Yeah, and there was one thing that you mentioned, that you use AI to kind of confirm what you already knew about your kids. And I find that to be one of the most helpful things about it, because there's just something about the way it mirrors back the information that you put in that helps you just, I don't know, grasp onto it or digest it again in a new way that you can really make sense of it. So that totally resonated with me. I'm sure you look at your kids' work and you knew that they needed work on transitions, but when it mirrors it back to you in that organized fashion, and then you can very easily riff back and forth to get ideas for implementation to target those skills, I'm sure that just makes it so much easier to plan. So that was a great example, a detailed example. I encourage any other second grade teachers who are out there to, try something similar. So let's move on to third grade. And Anna Marie, I'm going to start with you because uh, technology is something that you use, but it's not your most favorite thing. I think when you're interacting with kids, you prefer to, be kind of screen free and not rely as heavily on the technology. So I'm really curious to hear from you because you have been showing a growth mindset in terms of like, okay, let me give this a try and see if it's useful. So I'd love to hear in what ways it's useful and in what ways it's not useful, and just kind of get your perspective on that.
Even as I use AI, I always just tend to like rely on myself the most and like value my ideas the most and like the inspiration that comes from the children. But I have to say that the data, it's like you said, Diane, it confirms what you already know, but it also, we need reminders as teachers. We know what we know, but I have a student in my class who is acts as a doctor. He's a natural doctor. He reminds me, oh, this is good for osteoporosis. He gives me a prescription every day. And I feel like this is the same thing. Like I feel the data, and I love to be in a collaborative environment doing it. I'm grateful that I was learning AI in this group, because I found like the data sparks conversations, and the conversations and the collaboration is what I'm really inspired by. Like our meeting from yesterday, I was able to, I feel that, the data, like just the reminders that we have about maybe like the verbal reasoning and, the conversations it sparks when we are reminded of the data, like the sentence thing. It also helps me to realize what I have to focus on as a teacher, and then how that like then helps the children improve the student focus. So I think like, yes, for instance, yesterday we were discussing data, and last year I was part of a third grade team. I just got put on third grade, and all of a sudden we're doing AI. And I was comfortable in my first grade where I didn't have to do a lot of computer stuff. And when we were talking about that, we had this homegrown, as you like to say, Robyn, iced tea format that we use. And we were talking about the verbal reasoning and also the vocabulary and how the children need more time. And I've been finding that in the writing. So it kind of inspired me, because as if we were talking, I thought about the math vocabulary. And we were doing perimeter and area, and I was having the children have conversations. And even though I was bringing up this vocabulary, I felt that they weren't internalizing it and using it in their explanations. So I decided to bring that ICE-T, which is a format, an acronym that we use to help them to do literary analysis and sentence starters and organize their essays. And I decided to use it today for math, for perimeter and area. And at first I was going to use the ACID, but then I thought comparing was too hard. So I just said, what had a shape up with, different labeled with the measurements. And I said, we talked about all the different parts that perimeter. So we generated all the vocabulary, put it on the list, generated the vocabulary for area, the multiplication, the addition for perimeter, the sides, the rectangle, the length and the width and all that specific vocabulary. And we talked about how mathematicians have to use specific vocabulary. And it was great because another teacher, Mrs. Chapin, came in the room. So I said, we're going to model it first. And we're going to model how to use this vocabulary so that we can really say it in a very mathematical, way with the right vocabulary, precise vocabulary, and we did it. And then I just decided, as I was teaching it, I decided to pare it down just to perimeter, not because we modeled what's the difference between perimeter and area in this problem. And we explained it. Then we said, I gave them a new problem. I said, can you explain what the perimeter is? So what is the perimeter? That was the question. So they had to answer the question. The perimeter, first they had to do the math. The perimeter of this rectangle is 10 centimeters, let's say. And that was something we found from the test, that they needed help maybe distinguishing whether it's centimeters, inches, meters, and how that changes things. So we talked about that. Then they kept on giving reasoning. They said, I know this because, and they used the language. And the kids were doing really great with it. And then we did an area problem, and they used that. And they were doing turn and talk with partners. So there was a lot of verbal reasoning and language production and using that math vocabulary when they said, for instance, and then I had to do all the sides. So what did you do to all the sides? Use the right vocabulary. I added all the sides. And then we even there was one page where it shows all different size shapes like a circle, a skinny rectangle. We have been doing some work with that. So they have some observations about it. I said, put these shapes in order by perimeter from longest to shortest or shortest to longest. And they had to turn and talk again. And they had to answer the question. And then they had some really good deep thinking. So we did the perimeter, we did the area, and the final one, which was a little bit more challenging, they got really good. Just in that one lesson, they got so great at it. And I was so happy that we started it now, because if I started it later, now I can add to it the complexity with comparing and contrasting, but it gave them that verbal,
Yeah,
scaffolding.
It's scaffolding.
Yeah,
So
scaffolding and that verbal
happens,
practice so that they can use the vocabulary and then they'll be able to write it. We just did verbal.
yeah, and I think that, when you scaffold their thinking and their conversation with a structure, it can apply to any subject. So you used it beautifully in math. It can be used in science, but basically it helps them think through how they want to organize their thoughts, and it gives them some brief sentence starters to help them put their thoughts into words.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful example, and I just appreciate your willingness to jump in and give it a try, and and always coming back and sharing too in detail how it's going in your classroom. It's just, again, as you said at the very beginning, it sparks the conversation, and we can always build on that. So we have 2 new stars in our galaxy, 2 brand new teachers to our 3rd grade. And so I would like to leave a little space for you to talk about, Alex and Sarah, what it has been like to join a 3rd grade team that's in the midst of this initiative. Alex is brand new. This is her first teaching position, but Sarah comes to the ranch with some experience. So you both are new here, but you have different backgrounds. So I'll be curious to hear, Sarah, what it's like for you to come in and kind of jump into this AI initiative, and Alex, what it's like for you launching your first classroom and being in the midst of all of this, AI initiative and personalized pathways, and just jumping right into the GROW model.
Thank you for that introduction. So yeah, I come from teaching. I've taught 3rd grade in the past in New York City for a long time. And so one way that I've been using AI, I have 2 ways that I actually want to talk about, but one way is getting to know like the standards and the rubrics that are used in New Jersey versus New York, right? And so just being really specific in, what do my students need to be able to do, right? So I might have a CFS, like the check for understanding of like what they need to complete the assignment. I know the standard, but I've been using it with like a strict lens for either the NJSLA and to help me grade papers, because it's giving them more specific feedback, but then it really helps me also learn, right? Because I can be a better teacher if I understand the standards better, if I know like what they need to leave 3rd grade understanding and knowing. So that's been really helpful. And I've also, as a new teacher, we have a lot on our plate. And I love to like dig into data and look at student work and notice trends. And I also was noticing like I was grouping kids for like mini lessons or a strategy lesson or something like that. I was like kind of getting into a habit of like grouping kids in kind of the same groups. And so it was really helpful using ChatGPT, because it kind of took like my bias away in a way you could say, right? Of like, oh, well, this kid is working on spelling here, so he needs to be working on spelling here. Or this student is working on citing evidence, so I'm just going to put them in that group. And so it like allowed me to like really understand the student and know like, okay, specifically, what do they need support with without like my prior knowledge or my assumption or my bias. And so that's been really helpful, right? Because if we're going to close a gap and we're going to like make sure that they've learned thoroughly, like I need to make sure that they are getting exactly what they need and what's the most impactful. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey, and I've loved being along with it. So it's tougher.
I think my biggest issue that I had before I started with AI was I never wanted it to hinder my creativity. because I feel like that has been a specialty of mine, right? Like I can kind of think on the fly. But like Sarah was saying, there's so much to juggle that, you know, especially with like the intricacies of each lesson, just having a little bit of an extra unbiased eye look and say, like, these students really need help with this. And when we first started, actually, when we met as a third grade team with Robyn and Jeanine, and we ran all of our classes through the same data lens, every single one of my students was being put in the same group. So Anna Maria's and Sarah's were kind of mixed between like group 5 and group 6, and all of my students were in the same group. So I knew that that was something that I needed to work on with them. And what it really was closing the gap of, you know, creating the full circle of their citing with the question. Does what I'm pulling, the quote that I'm pulling, answer my question? And is my explanation thorough enough? So then I use ChatGPT to, actually I use Magic Schools to create little passages, because to then have to go through either the internet or my library to find books that they could read that would help with this was a little bit too time consuming for all of the other things that needed to be done. So I used ChatGPT to say, you know, here's an excerpt that I want examples of, come up with 6 different ones that follow this format with different characters or whatever. And then I had the students work in groups that were generated by the AI to help them identify exactly the different parts of the passage with highlighters and underlining to make sure that they fully understand. And then when I ran that back through, I felt like what I got back was exactly what I wanted to see. Like, they're not fully there, but they're really on their way. And we're still, you know, working on the making sure everything's a full sentence. You know, we really need those reminders. So little things like just simple sentences that have little problems with it. You know, maybe it needs an apostrophe by the S, or it's supposed to be plural and it's not. We were doing those in transitions, just putting a few up on the board and having a student come in and fix it. And then to elaborate on that, having them go in and make the sentence better. So we're taking these really simple foundational skills that they were struggling with that AI pointed out and correcting them while also building on them so that all of the students get something out of that lesson.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to see how people are all taking the initiative and approaching it in a different way. But no, and we couldn't be more proud of our brand new teachers here at Ridge Ranch. Thank you so much for jumping in and, you know, for learning alongside of us and just being courageous and taking the plunge here into AI. It's new for everybody. So yeah, we really appreciate that. I'm sorry, Robyn, you were going to say something?
That's okay. I was just going to comment. I didn't get a chance to comment after Anna Maria, so I want to circle back to that a minute, because Anna Maria, you know, is such a creative teacher. And I love that when we talk about AI and data. Anna Maria literally takes what AI or ChatGPT or Magic Schools, whatever she's using, and makes it her own. She'll take it and then put that creative spin on it that she's so good at doing. And I love how when Alex was saying she was scared that it was going to take the creativity out, that was one of my fears too, because one of the reasons I love being an elementary school teacher is to be creative. And I found along the way that ChatGPT gives me ideas that make me feel like I'm even more creative than I actually thought I was. So sometimes I get even more creative with ChatGPT than I thought I was going to be. It kind of gives me good ideas to circle around. And, you know, I've been working with Sarah and Alex a lot over the last couple of months, and I'm so grateful for their eagerness and flexibility to go on this mission with us. So kudos to you.
So we've heard about teachers using AI. Yes, high fives for sure. We've heard about teachers using AI to create supplementary materials, to keep their practice rooted in the standards, to make sure they're adhering to exactly what needs to be taught, to analyze student work, to create personalized pathways to close the learning gap. So, I mean, this is just, to me, so much more than I had ever anticipated it would be in the beginning, and I'm excited to see what is in store for us in the future in terms of ways that we can leverage AI to help students meet with success. No, I just wanted to say that the name of this podcast is Learn, Teach, Lead, and I cannot think of a more stellar example of people doing just that. So I want to thank you for learning alongside us, teachers, for taking the time to come here on this podcast after school when you're all tired. You could be doing other things, heading home, but you took the time out of your day to teach other teachers about what you're doing. And you're just such a fine example of leadership. I hope that other teachers will listen to this podcast and, be inspired by your professionalism, your willingness to learn, and your thoughtful approach as practitioners. So with that being said, it looks like that old clock on the wall tells us it is time to wrap up another episode of Learn, Teach, and Lead, the Friday Debrief. We've shared a few lessons, unpacked a few stories, and maybe sparked a few new ideas for your classroom or your leadership journey.
As always, we hope you'll take what you've learned, teach it forward, and lead with purpose. Thanks for spending part of your week with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.